Okay, someone asked me recently whether I regarded myself as an atheist. And, I've sort of witnessed atheism at work, and I'm not comfortable with that label at all. Uh, because embedded in it, it's sort of like the opposite to theism. So it's like it's two halves of one whole. When I think of and theism, being gods, when I think of the whole issue of these false religions, there is no God entity. So I don't want to acknowledge theism at all. I think a better title. So this is what I'm. If anyone asks me where I sit, I don't sit on either side of the thing. I just sit in reality. So realist. I'm a realist, and the way the measure for me for what's real and what can be discounted as unreal and therefore not bothered with is the test is the five senses. So if you can sensorially experience something, or a reliable person without any biases can sensorially experience something, then that's part of our reality. Anything outside of that is just not real, and by its nature, it's not worth worrying about or giving too much time to. That probably sits in, well with Nowism, or the Zen experience, where when you're right in the moment and your senses are alive with the experiences of that particular moment, and so you're a witness to reality. You can't use intellect to have that experience. That's why we have senses. So I'm a realist. Now, it might seem odd that if I'm a realist, why do I include Jesus in that equation? And how can I do it based on my rules that says the five senses must be the measure? Oh, and sorry, it's not just my five senses. It has to be independently verified, it has to be independently verifiable. So why do I include Jesus in that category? Because I do think that he was a real person. How do I sensorially validate that position? I can't go back in time, that's out. But Einstein's famous for E equals mc squared. Now, I can't go back and be a witness to him discovering that, but there will be multiple reports that say that he did discover it. But not only that, there will be no earlier discovery. So ultimately we can conclude, and I can test it. If I had the right skills in that, I could actually go and test that formula and validate that it is in fact a truth, a reality. So what he stated in the time, we can reasonably reliably know it was he that was the person that did it, because a lot of witnesses at that time acknowledged him as being the person that came up with that particular formula. So it was quite well publicised. And we can test it in today's age. Well, the same can be said about Jesus, believe it or not. Believe it or not. Oh, that's another thing. Beliefs, I hold them to be useless, of no value. The topic of discussion, or the thing that's of belief, the only time that you would want to accept it into your reality is that moment when it's sensorially validated. Up until then, it serves no function. So for me, if someone says Allah is a real God and he's the creator of everything, well, until such time as you can actually introduce me to Allah, I hold that he doesn't exist. I suppose, and until you can prove that that he actually made a man out of clay, and I suppose it was Eve as well, so a woman as well. I know she was made out of the bone, but until you can demonstrate that function in modern times, I'm going to say that you're actually talking myth or unreality. It's not real because it can't be verified. It's impossible. And we know through time, there's plenty of evidence that myths have been part of the human story. But also, we've come to accept a lot of them as myths. These bloody religions, Christianity and Islam, they are exactly the same form, but we continue to accept them as if there's some merit in what they're saying. And there's none. Again, unless you can, they're just not part of reality. They just simply aren't. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why that's actually true. But anyway, get back to Jesus. So Jesus, how do we know, or how can we validate? So using the same approach that allows us to know for sure that Einstein is responsible for a valid, real formula that can be applied in our real world, we can actually do the same for Jesus. And we have multiple witnesses. So we have this thing called, it's labeled the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, but it's not a Gospel of Thomas at all. It's actually a list of 114 Jesus sayings that have been recorded by Thomas. So all Thomas is so he's not the bringer of truth. He's just the person that writes it down. So there's 114 sayings. And that's exactly how the Muslims relate to this story of Jesus. That they call it an Injil, a Gospel of Jesus, and they say that he wasn't the author of it, right? They actually hold the view that it just vanished. It's disappeared, never to be seen again. What the authors of the Quran didn't realise is that at the time they thought it was lost for eternity. It was actually found in 1945, this sayings gospel. So get back to the point in question. How can we sensorially validate this as valid, a reality, these sayings, that they're actually real? Oh, and there's one other point. 61 of those sayings, and this is valid, can be verified. 61 of those sayings appear in the Bible. So someone has grabbed these sayings and used them and thought them of some merit or worth, enough so to put them into the Bible. But not all of them, which is an interesting side fact. All right, let's go and have a look at some of these sayings and see if they actually can be validated in our current time as accurate realities. All right, so what I'm going to do is this is called, how do I get rid of that? This is the Gospel of Thomas, right? But again, It's not a Gospel of Thomas at all. It's a sayings list, a Jesus sayings list, which is also discussed in a thing called Q-source theory. So this sayings list from Jesus starts off by saying, whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. Now, an important point here, you've got to be careful with the apologists. They'll sort of want you to, they want to ignore the term interpretation, but it's clearly there, it's clearly written in black and white. So you're being told that to get through these secret sayings, you've got to be able to interpret their proper meaning. That in itself gets a bit ambiguous, but if you persist and go through the whole group of sayings, what you'll find is that they'll actually start to tell a very consistent story, which could be witnessed in, you know, other spiritual shoots like Buddhism. There's parts of these are used in Christianity. You know, there's a common theme here. Judaism. Now, so what that means, what that specifically means is will not fear death. So at the end of the journey through, if you can understand the meaning of these sayings, you'll lose the fear of death. Now, that's a big thing in most religions. You'll notice in many of the, you know, the Abrahamic religions, there's a strong focus on escaping death. You know, you live eternally, you know, resurrection, all this sort of nonsense, things that can't be proven. But well, in my opinion, equally silly, but just not real. But they give people this sort of sense of, or that lifts them up over, you know, this innate fear of death that we have as humans, or it's actually our ego mind that's scared of dying. Right, so we actually see in Plato that he actually covers that topic off as well. Let's see if I can find it. And a test for anyone that thinks this is hooey, find someone that's a really saintly type within your circle of friends or family, you know, the really authentically selfless individual, and without prompting them or cueing them, just go up and ask them if they fear, if they're afraid of dying. I expect that you'll get an immediate response that says no, and they won't necessarily want to prolong the discussion or anything like that. They'll just give you a straight answer and they'll be happy to move on. And it's a genuine response. They're just not preoccupied with death at all. And that's relative to this particular topic. Right, here it is. This comes from Book 4 of Plato's Republic, some 400 years earlier than the times of Jesus. Then how can he who has magnificence of mind and is the spectator of all time and all existence think much of human life? He cannot. Or can such a one account death fearful? No, indeed. Then the cowardly and mean nature has no part in the true philosopher. So the true philosopher is really that good-natured person that's, I got a story that I tell, drives people nuts a bit, but about these two wolves. And basically, where are we? An old Cherokee told his grandson, there is a battle between two wolves inside us all. One is evil, it is anger, jealousy, greed, resentment, inferiority, lies, and ego, and the other is good, it is joy, love, peace, hope, humility, kindness, empathy, and truth. The boy thought about it and asked, grandfather, which wolf wins? The old man quietly replied, the one you feed. So it was back to personal choice about this duality that's within us all. And in Plato, there's a story of three characters, and basically two take up the bad wolf side of the equation, and the philosopher king takes up the good wolf. So, you know, these patterns, what I'm saying, they're evident. And if you're unbiased and not dishonest and have a look around at in your own life experience, you'll see these evidence of these things. What am I trying to think of? There's a play which reflects those three characteristics: the lover of gain, the lover of pride, and the lover of wisdom. So lover of gain, greed, lover of pride, ego, I can't think of it at the moment, but anyway, that particular story reflects these two wolves. Now, if we go back, we see that this philosopher king doesn't fear death, and that's a true statement, and it rings true. I mean, if you ask people that are genuinely, authentically selfless, I promise you'll find that they'll say that they're not afraid of death. Now, so that's this saying here, and he said, whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. So Plato's in accord. Me personally, my experience, when I ask people of that character, they validate it. Next one. 2, Jesus said those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. He doesn't say anything about belief or not. You know, this is about there's something to be actually worked out. When they find, they will be disturbed, and that's that situation where you have a notional or an idea about the world in your head, and it's not matched to the actual reality. So you're living a bit of a lie. So when you have to actually deal with that, you have to confront it. There's a disturbance for you, and then when they are disturbed, they will marvel. So you get on the other side of that. Now you're living not in a lie, you're living with truth now. You marvel at the commonness of mankind, how we all suffer from these, to use that the two-horse story, and will reign over all, and after they have reigned, they will rest. So reigning over all means that you actually just have the true understanding of how things function, people's behaviours. And if you watch people that are, again, saintly and that, they're quite astute in being able to work people out, and they have very effective strategies. It's because they understand the mechanics of ego and, where it's at play. So they know what's going on. And after you've reigned, you rest. So that's the enlightenment journey done and dusted. You're finished. Because there's no more searching, no more intellectual overhead. You just get on with life and have a very clear and transparent view of what life is. And that's why these religions have got to, be put to bed, because they block this clarity of life. Now, so I think that second one is verifiable. There we are. I think that second one is verifiable, as well as the first. Now the next one, this is where we get into the terminology that might immediately throw someone off guard. What have we got here? If your leaders say to you, but actually, it's amazingly accurate. You know, if you look at the big picture of the human story, it's just amazing how accurate this one is. If your leaders say to you, look, the Father's kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. So what he's doing there, he's in first century Judea, and he's basically saying that if your leaders, now this will be the Pharisees taught that from the book of Isaiah that Yahweh sat up top of a dome that covered the earth. That's the way that they viewed the world back in those days or earlier. So sitting up on top of this dome, looking down upon the population, and it was a bit of there's this thing called cults of personality, where they actually put the fear of God into your head, and it's how they, part of the way they gain control. They offer a solution to the death fear, but they also offer a bit of fear and trepidation if you don't fall into line. So this is what he's talking about. He's saying, if the Pharisees tell you that God's in the sky, that's bullshit. It's not true. But he put it a bit more politely. What he's saying that the birds will precede you, because the birds are masters of the airways. If they say to you it's in the sea, so that's probably a reference to Neptune, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and it's outside you. So he's talking there about nature, right? But using the language of the day. And it's like the Cherokee story about the two wolves, talking about these things being inside us. I have some ideas on what they actually are, but it's enough to say at this point that they're natural nature. And so nature's on the outside. When you know yourself, so this is becoming self-aware, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father, so products of nature. But if you do not know yourself, then you live in poverty and you are the poverty. So in other words, if you don't really get to terms with who you really are, you tend to live in a bit of a state of flux with an egoic notion of who you are, a bit of a false notion. And he's saying that if you do that, well, it's just like the two wolf story. They're saying, the grandfather was saying to the grandson, it's important that, you have to decide on which wolf you're going to feed. And that's exactly what he's saying here. So there's a consistency there in stories. Next one. Jesus said, the person old in days won't hesitate to ask a little child 7 days old about the place of life, and that person will live. For many of the first will be last and will become a single one. So what he's saying there is that, and this is true of life, a lot of people go through life never attaining enlightenment. They just go through, they make their best of life, they have a notional idea, they might have a belief like a religious person, but they never actually get to that point where they're totally free, totally self-aware, accurately, without error, So many go to their grave having missed life, basically. Now, the person old in days, so this is a mature person, won't hesitate in asking a little child. So these two walls, or this nature that's in humans, is born to us, is what he's saying. It's a natural part of who we are. And apart from some sort of intellectual impairment, perhaps, I don't know this, but yeah, we're all equal. And what it's saying is that the old person, having recognized that and honoring that it's part of the whole life story, he lives because he's enlightened. That's all he's saying. Nothing complicated. Now, know what is in front of your face is in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be disclosed to you. Well, there's nothing hidden that will not be revealed. So the reality of life is that there isn't, when we're talking about our nature, it's not hidden. It's evident in other people. You see other people being selfish and other people being compassionate and caring. So everything that you need to know is right in front of your face. You just have to accept that you're part of the human community, and what you witness in others is in you as well. It's all a matter of choice. His disciples asked him and said to him, "Do you want us to fast? How should we pray? Should we give to charity? What diet should we observe?" So that makes sense. You would expect that Jesus's followers would have come out of a Jewish community where they would have had they would have had all these sort of rituals to live by. That makes sense. I mean, we could find evidence that that's exactly what they would have done in those days, and we can actually still see it witnessed today. So that would be true. Jesus said, "Don't lie and don't do what you hate." Now that's important, because when you stop lying, you've got to live a more honest life. So you can't play your little mind games, as people do, and it makes for a better relationship between people, because people can depend upon you, over time, that you tell the truth. So don't lie is it's exceedingly important. It's one way to kill the ego. And don't do what you hate. So what we genuinely love to do is help each other. That's the genuine. People will tell you that they love a big car and they love this and they love the other material things that satisfy the self. But that's not really what people like. So he's saying, basically be authentically selfless, because all things are disclosed before heaven. Well, there's no guilt, or anything like that if you just live helping others. After all, there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, and there is nothing covered up that will remain undisclosed. This is an interesting one, but nonetheless, it's valid. Jesus said, "Lucky is the lion that the human will eat, so that the lion becomes human, and foul is the human that the lion will eat, and the lion still will become human." So no matter what, we're still going to be left with a human. But what sort of human is the question. If we replace the word lion, prides, etc., with the word ego, and if we replace the word eat with the word consume, things become a little bit more clearer. Lucky is the lion that the human, lucky is the ego that the human will consume, so that the ego becomes human. So what's happening there is the destruction of ego, and foul is the human that the ego consumes, and the ego still will become human, but a foul human, a human that's not living the good life and, fitting in with community, etc. So although it looks a bit abstract, it's pretty straightforward to understand what his intentions are there. We'll do one more and then I'll wrap this up. And he said, the person is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of little fish. Among them, the wise fisherman discovered a fine large fish. He threw all the little fish back into the sea and easily chose the large fish. Anyone here with 2 good ears had better listen. Now, if you ever known anyone that's lost a loved one, their whole view of what's important changes. So all the trivialities of life and all the fuss and bother about, everything else that are required, to seemingly make a fulfilled life, pale in significance to the, the relationship to the loved one. And that's exactly what this saying is about. Exactly. And so you can validate that in our human experiences. No problem at all. That saying is a very interesting one, because when you see it in the Bible, you can see how it was bastardized. So the way I said the saying is exactly what its intentions are. But when you see it used in the Bible, it says, Matthew 13:47, the parable of the net. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down unto the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up onto the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. So you can see a distinction there where we're now talking about 2 populations, those that are behaving badly or have been, sort of judged as unworthy, if you like, which is very much the type of cult teaching, where they're trying to admonish you if you don't follow the rules of the cult. Whereas the true Jesus saying is a very sound philosophical statement about how we are as humans. And it's encouraging us to value things properly. A very vast contrast, but there's no doubt they're using the same saying. I mean, it's clear in my mind which is the truthful statement, and it's also clear which one came first. And the second one has been used the first to craft more of a cult religion. So it goes, so the parable of the net. So what we're saying is this is the real Jesus speak. What he says, he said, the person is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of little fish. Makes the emphasis on little fish. Among them, the wise fisherman discovered a fine, large fish. He threw all the little fish back into the sea and easily chose the large fish. Anyone here with 2 good ears had better listen. So what he's trying to teach again is he's trying to teach that pay attention and have a look at what's important in your life. In the Bible, once again, the kingdom of heaven is a net and set down on the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up onto the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. Now, the end of the age concept, I think, was born out of the book of Daniel, where you've got this term, the end of times. But the end of times in the book of Daniel had been completed. It occurred in 160 AD. But these guys were building on that, thinking this is good, this scares people. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous. Yeah, so now we've got angels into the mix. Excuse me, we've got this concept of wickedness and righteousness, and throw them into a fiery furnace, right? So they're going to be burning in hell, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. So I have no doubt that is pure cult speak. All right, that'll do for today. Now, there's 114 sayings. They all have an explanation. And to argue that an example that I just read through on the fisherman story, to argue that this fisherman rationale was extracted from the other one, no way. No, not at all. What's happened is that the Romans took this collection of 114 sayings and then they just made it their own and introduced these cultish concepts. Okay. Stop.